Margaret Lane vanished after a routine PTA meeting in 2012. For over a decade, no one knew what happened. Her car was found, her purse untouched, and her footsteps vanished from the security footage. Then in 2024, demolition crews at Brookfield Elementary uncovered a hidden crawl space behind the auditorium stage, and inside, her skeletal remains. Clutched in her hand was a cracked phone with a last unsent message hinting at someone she trusted. The shocking truth had been sealed in the walls all along, waiting 12 years to come to light. Cedar Hollow wasn't the kind of place that made the news. It was quiet, too quiet sometimes. Rows of brick houses, maple trees leaning over sidewalks, kids playing with bikes till dusk. Everyone knew each other's names, or at least pretended to. And at the center of that small-town heartbeat was Brookfield Elementary, a red brick building that smelled of old books, chalk dust, and cafeteria pizza. Margaret Lane had walked through those doors for 14 years straight. Same hour, same smile. She wasn't just a teacher. She was the kind of person who noticed when you changed your hair or seemed a little off. She kept peppermint candies in her drawer for anxious students, and every kid swore she could somehow read your thoughts. That Tuesday, April 10th, 2012, felt just like any other. Spring rain had rinsed the streets clean, and the air had that warm, electric smell of the season waking up. Margaret was running late, juggling a tote bag full of essays and a half-empty coffee cup. She parked her silver Subaru near the school gym, waved at the janitor mopping the hallway, and hurried in for the PTA meeting. It was supposed to last an hour. Budget cuts, fundraiser plans, the usual small-town arguments about library funds. At 8:47 p.m., she sent her husband a text. "Almost done here. Be home soon." That was the last message anyone ever got from her. By 9:30, the parking lot was empty, except for her car. The headlights of a passing patrol car caught the reflection of a window sticker that read, "Yager 1 Teacher." Inside, her purse sat on the passenger seat, next to a bunch of graded essays and a half-melted chocolate bar. It didn't make sense. Margaret was cautious, routine, predictable in a comforting way. Her husband, Tom, said she always called if she was running even 5 minutes late. Always. When she didn't come home that night, he assumed the meeting ran long. When she didn't answer by morning, the worry turned into panic. By sunrise, the school was taped off, police cruisers lined the street, and neighbors gathered in small groups whispering the same thing. It's just not like her. Detective Laura Perez arrived just after 8 a.m. Coffee in hand, hair still damp from the shower, eyes sharp but heavy. She'd worked missing persons before, but something about this one made her stomach tighten. Security footage showed Margaret leaving the library wing at 8:52 p.m., turning right toward the teacher's lounge. After that, nothing. Not a single frame of her leaving the building. Detective Perez walked the halls herself. Slow, deliberate steps, the sound of her shoes echoing off the linoleum. She traced Margaret's path from the meeting room to the lounge, down the corridor toward the auditorium. The motion sensors in that hallway should have picked something up, but they didn't. And yet there was something else, a faint smell of bleach coming from behind the stage. The janitor swore he'd cleaned earlier that day. Still, Laura made a note of it. At the far end of the corridor, a bricked-over door caught her eye. The masonry looked older than the rest of the wall, uneven, like someone had sealed it in a hurry. When she asked about it, the school's custodian, Alan Brooks, rubbed the back of his neck and said, "That's been there for years, way before my time. Some old maintenance corridor, I think." He didn't look her in the eye when he said it. Outside, the town buzzed with theories. At the diner across from the school, two parents whispered over coffee. "You think she ran off? Maybe some secret life?" "Nah, not Mrs. Lane. She wasn't built that way." By the second day, news crews arrived. Her students taped drawings to the school gate. Hearts, flowers, a message that read, "Come home soon, Mrs. Lane." Detective Perez organized a search. K-9 units combed the building, tailing Margaret's scent through the lounge, the backstage hallway, and right up to that same bricked-over door, where it stopped cold. The dogs scratched at the floor, whining, confused. They circled back again and again. Same spot, same wall. Perez stood there a long time, hand on her hip, eyes tracing the cracks in the bricks. She felt it, that subtle heaviness that fills the air before something bad reveals itself. But without a warrant, she couldn't just tear through school property. Instead, she sealed off the hallway and brought in forensic teams. Dust swabs, UV lights, fiber sweeps, nothing conclusive. It was like the building had swallowed Margaret whole. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into silence. By summer, the school reopened. New semester, new students, but an empty desk in the teacher's lounge, untouched since April. And every time the janitor passed that bricked wall, he said the same thing quietly to himself. It's just a wall. But even he didn't believe that anymore. The investigation stretched through the summer like a shadow that refused to fade. Cedar Hollow wasn't used to police tape and satellite vans. For weeks, the school parking lot looked like a movie set, flashing cameras, officers pacing with clipboards, and neighbors whispering across fences. Detective Laura Perez didn't believe in coincidences, and this case had too many. She lived out of her office for weeks, cold coffee, wrinkled reports, and the same loop of security footage replaying over and over. Margaret walking down the corridor at 8:52. The flicker of a hallway light. And then static. Nothing after that. Like the building itself had decided to erase her. They interviewed everyone, teachers, custodians, parents. The only consistent name that kept surfacing was Alan Brooks, the school's longtime custodian. Alan had worked there since 2005. Quiet, soft-spoken, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. When Laura questioned him, he seemed nervous, hands trembling slightly as he wrung his mop handle. He said he'd been cleaning the gym until 9:30 that night, then locked up and went home. His story checked out on paper, but there was something off, a flicker behind his eyes, a hesitation before every answer. She asked if he knew about the sealed door behind the stage. He shrugged, said, "That's from the old blueprint. They sealed it years ago. Asbestos, I think." But he never met her gaze. Forensics swept the bricked area again, but there was nothing to justify tearing it down. No blood, no hair, no fingerprints. Just silence and the faint scent of cleaning chemicals, strong enough to burn the eyes. Still, Laura couldn't shake the image of that door. At night, she'd sit in her car across from the school, headlights off, watching the faint glow from the auditorium windows. Sometimes she'd imagine hearing movement inside, footsteps echoing where no one should be. Weeks turned to months. Leads dried up. Every time she thought she had something, it slipped through her fingers, like trying to hold smoke. By October, the department was stretched thin. New cases, new priorities. Margaret's file got pushed deeper into the stack. Missing person, presumed abducted. No evidence, no body, no witness. Her husband, Tom, stopped sleeping. Every night he'd drive to the school parking lot, just to sit in her car, her scent still faint on the headrest, her notes still tucked in the dashboard. He'd whisper, "If you're out there, just give me something, anything." The town tried to move on, but it lingered in the air. That tension you could taste. At the diner, people still whispered when her name came up, "You know they say the janitor had keys to every door?" "Hush, don't say that out loud. His sister lives next door to my cousin." Rumors turned into folklore. Kids dared each other to sneak into the auditorium after dark, claiming they could hear humming. The same tune Mrs. Lane used to play for her class during reading time. Detective Perez kept the case alive longer than she should have. She even requested a forensic dig behind the bricked wall, but the school board denied it. Too costly, too disruptive, too speculative. By the end of 2013, the file was stamped inactive. Laura boxed the evidence herself, phone records, interview transcripts, photos of that cursed wall, and slid it onto the shelf. She stood there for a long moment, the dust catching light through the blinds. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry, Margaret." Years passed. The school changed principals, new paint, new lockers, new faces, but the foundation stayed the same. Every student who walked the halls passed by that sealed wall, never knowing what hid behind it. Tom Lane eventually sold the house. Too many memories, too much emptiness. Their daughter, Anna, Grew up clinging to fading memories, her mother's voice reading bedtime stories, her perfume, the way she laughed when she forgot where she put her glasses. And yet, she never gave up. Every April 10th, she placed fresh lilies at the school gate. Sometimes she'd stand there alone, just staring, as if listening for something only she could hear. By the time 2024 rolled around, most people had forgotten. The case had turned into a ghost story, a rumor passed down through staff meetings and whispered during power outages. But the truth, it was still there, waiting behind that same wall, silent, unmoved, patient. The winter of 2024 arrived cold, with a brittle wind that whispered through the empty halls of Brookfield Elementary. The school was scheduled for a major renovation. New auditorium seating, upgraded HVAC, fresh paint, a facelift that would erase decades of peeling linoleum and cracked plaster. Demolition crews arrived early in the morning, boots crunching over frost-bitten gravel. The air smelled of wet concrete and sawdust. They began tearing out the old stage floorboards first, the wood groaning like it had memories it wanted to keep. Jack, the foreman, muttered to his assistant, "I swear this place is ancient. Some of this wood, it smells like 1970. A hammer struck a beam. Dust puffed into the frigid air. Then came a dull thud, echoing strangely from behind the bricked-over wall. At first, they thought it was just debris. But as the team pried open the masonry, a small crawl space revealed itself. Dark, narrow, and unnervingly silent. Inside, amidst rusted tools and a broken mop bucket, something moved, or seemed like it had. Jack crouched, flashlight slicing through decades of dust and cobwebs. That's when he saw the skeletal remains. A cardigan hung loosely over brittle bones, a faded faculty ID pinned to it. Margaret Lane. The crew froze. The smell of decay hit the back of their throats, a muted, metallic scent that made their stomachs churn. Some instinctively turned away. Some whispered under their breath, "Oh, no, it's her. I can't believe it." Detective Laura Perez was called immediately. She arrived in the cold afternoon, her breath steaming in the frosty air. She walked slowly, deliberately, her eyes tracing the edges of the narrow crawl space. It was smaller than she imagined, a space someone could barely curl into. No ventilation, no light, no escape. Just darkness sealed behind decades of concrete and plaster. As forensic teams carefully extracted the remains, Laura noticed a hand still clutched around something fragile. A smartphone, cracked and yellowed with age. When they carefully retrieved it, a message partially remained on the screen. "Alan, I saw you in the office drawer. We need to talk." Laura swallowed hard. That text, frozen in time, was more than a clue. It was a direct window into Margaret's final moments, her realization, her fear, and the man who had caused it. Inside the crawl space, the dust had preserved evidence. Tiny flecks of dried concrete clung to the vertebrae. Fibers from her cardigan suggested a struggle, and DNA. Under her fingernails, traces of a man's DNA lingered, a detail that would soon crack the case wide open. Outside, crews worked in uneasy silence. One of them muttered, "Who even knew this was back here? No one mentioned a hidden corridor." Turns out, it wasn't on the current blueprints. Only the original 1972 plans showed the corridor. A professional sealing job had been done decades ago, likely to hide asbestos hazards. Whoever did it after Margaret's death knew exactly what they were concealing. The realization hit Laura like a punch. Margaret had not wandered off. She hadn't left the building. She had been trapped all along by someone with access, knowledge, and opportunity. That night, Laura sat alone in her office, the cold fluorescent light buzzing overhead. She held the old ID badge in her hands, fingers tracing the faded ink, and whispered to herself, "Margaret, I'm so sorry it took so long." She reviewed the old case files again, now armed with this new evidence. One name kept returning: Alan Brooks, the custodian, the only man who had keys to every corner, who had worked the night she disappeared, and who had intimate knowledge of that sealed wall. Laura's hands shook slightly as she pulled his file. He was retired, living in New Mexico, untouched by investigation, invisible to the world. Until now. Her stomach tightened. She knew what had to happen next. It wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about justice for Margaret, and finally giving a family the answers they had been starving for. Outside, the demolition crews sealed the site for the night. The snow had started falling, soft, heavy flakes that blurred the building's edges. The school stood silent, imposing, a monument to decades of secrets. And tonight, one of them had finally been unearthed. Laura stepped into the cold, exhaling a cloud of vapor. She looked up at the auditorium roof and whispered, "I see you, Margaret. I promise. I'll find him." The pieces were falling into place. The investigation that had gone cold 12 years ago was waking up, slowly, deliberately, with the weight of a decade of silence pressing down on every move. And somewhere, across state lines, Alan Brooks was living in a world that would soon collapse around him. The phone call to New Mexico came just after dawn. Detective Laura Perez had rehearsed the words a dozen times, but nothing could steady the tension in her chest. 12 years. 12 years of cold leads, empty files, whispered rumors, and a family waiting in silence. She flew out that morning, the airplane engines droning, each mile a countdown. By the time she arrived in the sun-scorched streets of Albuquerque, Alan Brooks' house looked ordinary, a beige bungalow with wind chimes clinking softly in the breeze. Nothing in the world hinted at the secret he had carried for over a decade. Laura knocked on the door. A man in his late 60s, hair thinning, hands scarred from years of janitorial work, answered. He blinked at her, confused. "Detective, can I help you?" His calm didn't last. When Laura showed the badge and explained why she was there, the color drained from his face. I don't know what you mean." But the DNA results were undeniable. Male DNA under Margaret Lane's fingernails, a perfect match. At first, Brooks tried to deflect. He mentioned old colleagues, misplaced keys, even a faulty lock on the auditorium door. But Laura was patient, relentless, letting him fidget, sweat, and twist until the weight of years of lies became unbearable. Finally, his voice cracked, low and trembling. "She caught me, taking the fundraiser cash. I didn't know she would." He paused, shivering, staring at the carpet like it could swallow him whole. "I hit her with the flashlight. I didn't know what else to do. She was screaming, and I panicked. I dragged her into the corridor. That wall. I sealed it myself. I didn't mean for her to die." Laura listened, quiet, letting the confession unfold like a slow, bitter melody. The years, the pain, the fear, the secrecy, it all poured out in that room. Brooks was arrested that same day. By March 2024, he was charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence, a sentence that would follow him for the rest of his life. Back in Cedar Hollow, the town waited with bated breath. Families, former students, colleagues, all gathered in the empty auditorium, now renovated, to witness the unveiling of the memorial. On April 10, 2025, exactly 13 years after Margaret's disappearance, the ribbon was cut. A garden bloomed where the old stage once loomed, fresh grass, flowers in soft whites and purples, a curved bench engraved with her name. Her former students laid lilies on the bench. Some read aloud the poems she had loved. Others whispered stories no one else knew. She let me read my story aloud even when I was scared. I used to hide under her desk during recess just to talk to her. Every anecdote, every tear, every shared memory filled the space with a warmth that the building had never known. Laura stood at the back, hands clasped, breath fogging in the cool spring air. She thought of Margaret curled into that hidden corridor all those years ago, and of the family who had waited so long for justice. The memorial wasn't just a garden, it was closure, a place to grieve, to remember, to finally release the ghost that had haunted the hallways for over a decade. In her journal later that evening, Laura wrote, "Margaret Lane is no longer just a name on a missing persons file. She's remembered. She's seen. And for once, justice has a voice." The town slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, the kind Cedar Hollow had always known. But in the hearts of those who loved her, Margaret's presence lingered, a soft light shining through cracks, a whisper carried on the wind. And sometimes, on quiet spring mornings, students who had never known her would sit on her bench, feeling the weight of a story that had waited 12 long years to finally be told. The wall that had hidden her could no longer contain the truth. Margaret Lane's story had been uncovered, her memory honored, and in that, the town found peace. Imagine being gone for 12 years, and the truth hiding right under everyone's noses. Click to watch the full story and uncover what really happened to Margaret Lane.